Hi, today we are going to solve two-step inequalities. I don't know about you, but I love solving equations, and inequalities are no different. But before we begin, we need to go over something very important. We need to make sure that we know our inequality signs. So we have greater than and less than. How I remember it is that this one kind of looks like an arrow that's going forward because it's greater. So it's the best and it gets to keep going. But this one has to go home, turn back and go home because he's not as great. That's how I remember it. Any way that you use to remember it is awesome as long as you remember that this is greater than and this one is less than. Let's solve and graph 2y minus 3 is less than or equal to negative 5. Now, before we start, I want you to know that solving inequalities is pretty much the same as solving equations. So if it's easier for you to solve the inequality with an equal sign, then solve it like this and plug in the inequality back at the end. But for this video, we are going to keep it as is. Okay, so we know that our main objective or our main goal is to get y by itself. So in order to do that, we need to work away from the y first, okay? So away from the y means working with the negative 3 or minus 3. And as you know, we cancel out this 3 by using the opposite operation. So if our operation here is minus, we know that the opposite operation is plus. So we're going to add 3 to both sides. Now we have 2y minus 3 plus 3 is less than or equal to negative 5 plus 3. And negative 3 plus 3 is just 0. And negative 5 plus 3 is negative 2. And we can rewrite this as 2y is less than or equal to negative 2. Now, as you know, we continue doing the opposite operation, and 2y is a multiplication problem, right? It's like 2 times y. And the opposite of multiplication is division. So we have to divide by 2 on both sides. 2 divided by 2 is just 1, so we have 1y, which is the same as y, is less than or equal to negative 2 divided by 2, which is negative 1. And this is the same as saying y is less than or equal to negative 1. Hooray! Now let's graph it. First, we have to find negative 1 on our number line, which is right here. So we draw a little circle. But since it's less than or equal to, it means that it can include negative 1. So negative 1 is an option, which means that we have to fill in the circle. And since it's less than or equal to negative 1, we know that anything that's less than negative 1 is going to work for this equation, which means that anything on this side of the number line or on this side of negative 1 is going to be our solution. So this is how our graph looks. Not too bad, right? Let's try another one. Now let's try solving negative 9 is greater than or equal to negative 1/3 x plus 6. And as you can see, the x is on the other side of the equation, but that's totally fine because we're going to solve it the same way. And we know that our primary objective is to, you got it, get x by itself. So first we have to work on the same side as the x, and we want to work away from it. So what is on the same side as x, but that's away from it? Our 6. It's plus 6, and we have to solve by the opposite operation, which means that we have to subtract 6 from both sides. So now we have negative 9 minus 6 is greater than or equal to negative 1/3 x plus 6 minus 6. Negative 9 minus 6 is negative 15. It's greater than or equal to negative 1/3 x, and plus 6 minus 6 is just 0. So this is what we have now. Now, Fractions tend to scare most people, but I know that you are brave and I know that you love fractions. So this is what we do. Fractions are think of them as a division problem. So what's the opposite of division? Of course, multiplication. So to get rid of the negative 1/3, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply by negative 3/1. Notice that it's just the reciprocal, it's the opposite. And whatever we do to one side, of course, we have to do to the other side. So again, we're multiplying by negative 3/1. Now, negative 3/1 is the same as negative 3, right? So negative 3 times negative 15 is, there you go, positive 45, because two negatives make a positive. Now we have 45 is greater than or equal to negative 1/3 times negative 3/1. So let's see what happens when you multiply these two. We have negative 1/3 times negative 3/1. This gives us negative times a negative, which is a positive. So positive 3/3, which is the same as 1. See how that works? So we're multiplying by the reciprocal to get only one x. We're trying to cancel it. So when you multiply by the reciprocal, then you cancel that fraction to just 1, which is exactly what we want. So now we have 45 is greater than or equal to 1x, which is the same as x. Now, I wish we could say we're done, but we're not, because there's a rule that we have to remember when multiplying and dividing by negatives, and that is to flip the sign. So, since we multiplied by negative 3 on both sides, we have to flip this inequality. So this actually says 45 is less than or equal to x. Think about it like this. When you hang out with a negative person, that negative person makes you change your ways. So when you multiply or divide by a negative, it changes the way of the sign, or it changes the sign, so you have to flip it. And we could stop here, but I know what you're thinking again. The x is on the wrong side. So we can move the x to the other side, but we have to change the inequality. That's because if we only switch the x and the 45 and we keep the inequality the same, then it actually completely changes what the inequality says. So if we are going to bring the x to the other side, like we typically like to do, then we have to change the inequality symbol again. So change the inequality when you multiply or divide by a negative, because a negative makes you change your ways. And if you're going to move the x to the other side, or you want to flip the inequality, you have to change the sign. You may be looking at me with crossed eyes, but that's okay. You're going to get it. Let's look at negative 5y plus 3 is greater than or equal to 28. Now, as you know, our goal is to get y by itself, so we have to work away from it first. Since we have a plus 3, we want to subtract 3 on each side. And now we have negative 5y plus 0 is greater than or equal to 25. And this is the same, as you know, as negative 5y is greater than or equal to 25. Now, negative 5y is a multiplication problem, right? It's the same as saying negative 5 times y. And the opposite of multiplication, as you know, is division. So we are going to divide by negative 5 on both sides. Okay? And negative 5 divided by negative 5 is just 1y, or y. We divided by a negative. And what do negatives make you do? They make you change your ways. So we have to change our sign to less than or equal to. And now we have 25 divided by negative 5, which is negative 5. Okay? So Since we divided by a negative, we have to flip the sign. And let's say we wanted to write it the other way. We could write -5 is greater than or equal to y. But both of them say the same thing. Let's try one more just for good measure. So our x is on this side and we want to get it by itself. So as you know, we have to work away from the x first. We have a -9 and the opposite operation of minus is plus. So we're going to add 9 to both sides. And now we have 4x plus 0 is greater than -7 plus 9 is +2. And 4x plus 0 is the same as saying 4x. So 4x is greater than 2. Now, as you know, we have a multiplication problem right here. And how we get rid of the 4 is we divide. I know that you said divide. So we're going to divide by 4 on both sides. 4 divided by 4 is 1, which leaves us with x is greater than 2 divided by 4, but we always simplify, so 2/4 is simplified as 1/2. And let's graph it just for funsies. So we have to first locate 1/2 on the number line. Positive 1/2 is probably somewhere around here, right, in between 0 and 1. So we're going to draw our circle. And we're not going to fill it in because it's greater than 1/2, which means that it doesn't include 1/2, unfortunately. So we're just going to leave the bubble empty, and since it's greater than, it means anything greater than or farther down the number line than 1/2 is a solution. So we're going to shade everything that's greater than 1/2. Try these problems on your own on a separate sheet of paper and bring them to class tomorrow for credit. Also, let me give you a hint. On number 4, -b/7 is the same as saying -1/7b. Okay? Just in case you can't figure out, it's a little hint for you. Good luck, you got this.